The year is 1582, and the deep, undulating heart of an English winter has settled over the landscape like a heavy, velvet shroud. It is a time of profound stillness, a period where the world seems to hold its breath beneath a thick, insulating layer of white. The air is motionless, devoid of the slightest breeze, suspended in a state of crystalline purity that carries the scent of distant wood smoke and the sharp, clean tang of frozen earth. We find ourselves within the sturdy, time-weathered walls of a great Tudor manor house, a structure built of honey-colored stone and dark, ancient oak, standing as a silent sentinel against the encroaching frost. Inside the long gallery, the light is dim and amber, filtered through small, diamond-shaped panes of leaded glass. Each pane is a work of individual craftsmanship, slightly irregular, casting soft, distorted shadows across the wide planks of the polished floor. Outside, the world is a monochromatic masterpiece, a study in shades of pearl, ash, and charcoal. The garden, usually a riot of structured color and manicured form, has been transformed into a ghostly architecture of mounds and hollows. The transition from the warmth of the hearth to the bracing clarity of the winter morning is a slow, deliberate ritual, a series of small, rhythmic movements that prepare the body and the mind for the journey ahead. You begin by attending to your attire, a process that is as methodical as it is necessary. First, there is the weight of the heavy wool cloak, a garment of substantial thickness, dyed a deep, somber indigo that seems to absorb the soft indoor light. The fabric is coarse yet comforting, the fibers woven tightly to repel the dampness of the snow. As you lift it from its peg, the wool gives off a faint, earthy aroma, a mixture of the sheep it once belonged to, the vegetable dyes of the vat, and the dry, cedar-scented air of the wardrobe. You feel the substantial weight of the cloak settle onto your shoulders, the pressure grounding you, providing a sense of security and enclosure. The collar, lined with a soft, reclaimed fur, brushes against the nape of your neck, a gentle, insulating warmth that contrasts with the coolness of the room. Next, you reach for your gloves. They are made of thick, supple buckskin, tanned to a pale cream color. They have been treated with a layer of rendered tallow to make them water-resistant, giving the leather a slightly waxy, substantial feel. You slide your hand into the first glove, feeling the inner lining of soft flannel catch against your skin. One by one, your fingers find their places, the leather stretching slightly to accommodate your movements. You flex your hand, listening to the faint, rhythmic creak of the leather, a dry, sliding sound that underscores the silence of the gallery. You repeat the process with the other hand, smoothing the leather over your wrist and tucking the cuff of your doublet beneath the protective gauntlet of the glove. Your footwear consists of sturdy leather boots, reaching mid-calf, with thick soles carved from seasoned elm. They have been greased repeatedly with linseed oil and beeswax until the leather is nearly black and shines with a dull, muted luster. The laces are thongs of rawhide, which you pull tight, the sound of the leather dragging through the eyelets a sharp, repetitive rasp in the quiet air. Each knot is tied with precision, ensuring a snug fit that will keep the creeping cold of the frozen ground at bay. You stand, testing the weight of the boots on the floorboards. The sound of your footsteps is now muffled, a low, rhythmic thud that echoes softly down the length of the gallery. Before you leave, You pause by the window to observe the frost patterns that have climbed the glass. They are intricate, fern-like structures, crystalline maps of a frozen world. You lean in close, your breath forming a small, dissipating cloud of mist on the pane. The frost is composed of thousands of tiny, interlocking needles, each one reflecting the pale, gray light of the morning. You trace the outline of a frosted leaf with your gloved finger, feeling the slight resistance of the ice against the leather. Beyond the glass, the garden waits, a silent, geometric puzzle of boxwood and yew, now draped in a uniform mantle of white. You move toward the great oak door that leads to the terrace. The door is a massive slab of timber, reinforced with horizontal iron bands that have been hammered into shape by a local blacksmith. The iron is cold to the touch, even through your gloves, its surface pitted and textured from years of exposure to the elements. The latch is a heavy lever of forged steel. You place your hand upon it, feeling the solid, unyielding nature of the metal. As you press down, there is a distinct mechanical click, the sound of the internal mechanism releasing its hold. The sound is sharp and clear, vibrating through the wood and into your arm. The door opens with a slow, heavy groan, the hinges complaining slightly as they move against the cold. A thin ribbon of frigid air immediately curls into the gallery, a sharp contrast to the stale warmth of the interior. It smells of ice, of sleeping earth, and the faint, sweet scent of the boxwood hedges buried beneath the drifts. You step across the threshold, and the transition is complete. The air hits your face with a bracing, invigorating clarity, a gentle shock that awakens the senses without overwhelming them. You stand for a moment on the stone terrace, your boots resting on the heavy slabs of Yorkstone. The terrace is wide and elevated, offering a panoramic view of the knot garden below. The stones beneath your feet are partially cleared of snow, revealing their rugged, uneven surfaces. You can see the individual grains of the sand-colored rock, the small flecks of mica that glint like tiny diamonds in the low light. The mortar between the stones has crumbled in places, replaced by tiny tufts of frozen moss, now brittle and gray. The silence here is absolute. It is not a void of sound, but rather a density of quiet, as if the snow itself is absorbing every vibration. You can hear the rhythmic pulse of your own breathing, a soft, steady flow of air that turns to white vapor the moment it leaves your lips. The vapor hangs in the air for a second, a fleeting, ethereal shape, before slowly thinning and vanishing into the gray sky. You listen for the sound of birds, but they are silent, huddling in the thickets or the eaves of the house, conserving their energy against the frost. You look down at the snow covering the terrace railing. It has accumulated to a depth of several inches, forming a perfectly smooth, rounded cap over the carved stone balusters. The snow is not a pure white, but a complex series of highlights and shadows, ranging from a brilliant, chalky ivory where the light hits it to a deep, translucent blue in the crevices. You reach out and touch the surface of the snow with your gloved hand. It is light and powdery, the individual flakes so cold that they do not melt, but simply rearrange themselves under your touch. You press your palm down, creating a perfect, shallow indentation, a temporary mark on a pristine surface. The descent from the terrace to the garden level is a flight of wide stone steps. Each step is a broad, shallow platform, designed for a slow and stately progression. The snow on the steps has drifted, creating a series of soft, undulating waves. You take your first step down, and the sound is a satisfying, rhythmic crunch. It is the sound of thousands of tiny ice crystals shattering under the weight of your elm-soled boots, a dry, crisp noise that is the very definition of a winter walk. You pause after each step, allowing the sound to fade completely into the stillness before taking the next. The movement is hypnotic. Crunch, pause, silence, crunch, pause, silence. Your focus narrows to the small patch of white directly in front of you. You observe the way the snow compresses, the way the edges of your footprint are sharp and defined in the frozen powder. As you reach the bottom of the stairs, you turn back to look at your trail. A series of deep, dark hollows now marks the path you have taken, a temporary record of your presence in this silent world. Before you lies the entrance to the knot garden. This is the heart of the Tudor landscape, a place of rigid geometry and symbolic meaning, now softened and blurred by the winter. The entrance is marked by two tall pillars of stone, each topped with a carved heraldic beast, a lion and a greyhound. The animals are draped in white, their fierce expressions muted by caps of snow. The gate between them is made of wrought iron, an intricate web of scrolls and leaves. It stands slightly ajar, its dark lines etched sharply against the white background. You move toward the gate, your footsteps continuing their steady, rhythmic crunch. The air seems to grow even stiller as you enter the garden, sheltered as it is by high walls of brick and clipped evergreens. The smell of the boxwood is stronger here, a bitter, resinous scent that is synonymous with the Tudor garden. Even in the depths of winter, the evergreen leaves persist, their dark green color visible in small patches where the wind has brushed away the snow. As you pass through the gate, you feel a sense of enclosure, of being held within a private, secret world. The garden is a series of interconnected rooms, each defined by low hedges and gravel paths. In the summer, these paths would be filled with the sound of lavender and bees, but now they are corridors of white, leading the eye toward the center of the garden where a sundial stands, a solitary finger of stone casting no shadow under the overcast sky. You decide to follow the perimeter path first, a long, straight stretch that runs alongside the southern wall. The wall is made of small, handmade red bricks, their surfaces rough and weathered. You can see the marks of the mason's tools, the slight variations in color from deep crimson to a pale, sandy orange. The wall holds the faint residue of the autumn's sun, a thermal mass that prevents the snow from clinging too tightly to its surface. A few skeletal vines of climbing roses remain attached to the brickwork, their thorns like tiny, frozen daggers. You walk slowly, your pace dictated by the density of the snow. Every few yards, you stop to examine a detail that catches your eye. A single red hip remains on a rose bush, a brilliant drop of color in the white landscape. It is shriveled and frozen, its skin taut and translucent. You marvel at its resilience, at the way it holds onto its life even in the face of such overwhelming cold. The path leads you past a row of espaliered fruit trees, their branches trained flat against the wall in a series of elegant horizontal lines. The trees are dormant, their bark a dark, textured gray. You can see the dormant buds, small, hard nodules that contain the promise of spring, now encased in a protective layer of frost. You reach out and run your gloved hand along one of the branches, feeling the bumps and ridges of the wood. It is cold and unyielding, a sleeping limb waiting for the turn of the season. The sound of your walking remains the dominant sensory experience. The rhythmic, mechanical crunch of the snow, the faint rustle of your wool cloak against your legs, and the steady, quiet flow of your breath. These sounds create a cocoon of auditory comfort, a repetitive loop that lulls the mind into a state of calm observation. There is no urgency here, no need to reach a destination. The walk itself is the purpose, a slow immersion into the textures and silences of a Tudor winter. You continue along the wall, the garden unfolding before you in a series of slow, predictable patterns. The hedges of the knot garden create a labyrinthine structure of white mounds, their geometric precision still visible beneath the snow. You can trace the outlines of the diamonds, the hearts, and the interlacing squares that make up the design. It is a garden of the mind as much as the senses, a place where order and nature meet in a quiet, frozen embrace. As you reach the corner of the garden where the south wall meets the east, you find a small stone bench tucked into a niche. The bench is covered in a thick cushion of snow, untouched and perfect. You stand before it, considering the stillness of the seat. It is a place for contemplation, for sitting and watching the slow descent of the winter sun, though today the sun is hidden behind a seamless veil of gray. You do not sit, for the cold would soon seep through your layers, but you appreciate the invitation of the bench, its silent presence a testament to the garden's role as a place of rest. Turning now to face the interior of the garden, you see the sundial in the distance. It marks the intersection of the main paths, the focal point of the entire design. Between you and the dial lies a vast expanse of undisturbed snow, a white canvas waiting for your footprints. You begin to move toward it, your boots sinking deep into the powder, each step a deliberate act of creation. The garden feels vast in its silence, an infinite world of white and gray, held together by the dark, skeletal lines of the trees and the sturdy, enduring walls of the manor house. The light begins to shift almost imperceptibly, a subtle deepening of the gray as the morning progresses. There is no wind, no movement, only the slow, rhythmic progression of your walk through the silent, snow-covered Tudor garden. You are a solitary figure in a landscape of stillness, a witness to the quiet beauty of a world at rest. The center of the knot garden is marked by a profound sense of mathematical stillness. As you approach the limestone plinth that supports the sundial, your footsteps create a rhythmic, percussive cadence against the silence. Each stride requires a deliberate lifting of the leg, the heavy elm soles of your boots breaking through the thin, icy crust that has formed on the surface of the snow since the last flurry. There is a brief resistance, a crystalline snap, followed by the soft, muffled compression of the powdery layers beneath. You move with the slow, measured gait of a person who has all the time in the world, a gait that honors the quietude of the season. The sundial stands as the geometric heart of this Tudor landscape. It is a pillar of weathered oolitic limestone, a stone characterized by its warm, honey-colored hue and its fine, granular texture. Even under the thick blanket of winter, the stone retains a hint of the sun's ancient warmth. though today it is as cold as the air that surrounds it. You reach the circular dais upon which the plinth rests and pause, your breath rising in a slow, steady plume of white. You observe the way the snow has gathered around the base of the pillar, forming a perfect, sloping buttress of white that mimics the architectural stability of the manor house itself. You extend a gloved hand to brush away a small patch of snow from the horizontal face of the dial. The buckskin of your glove makes a faint, sliding sound against the frozen metal, a dry, rasping whisper. Beneath the snow, the bronze plate is dark, oxidized to a deep greenish-black patina by decades of exposure to the English rain and mist. The gnomon, the triangular blade that casts the shadow of time, is a sharp, elegant silhouette against the pale sky. Today, however, it casts no shadow. The light is so diffused, so perfectly even across the gray dome of the heavens, that time seems to have suspended its forward march. The Roman numerals, etched with painstaking precision into the bronze, are filled with tiny, glittering grains of ice, making them appear as if they were inlaid with silver. You trace the curve of the number XII with the tip of your finger. You can feel the slight indentation of the engraving through the leather of your glove, a subtle, tactile reminder of the human craftsmanship that sought to measure the infinite. The bronze is cold, a biting, metallic chill that even the thick buckskin cannot entirely repel. You withdraw your hand and tuck it back into the warmth of your indigo cloak, feeling the heavy wool settle once more against your chest. The weight of the garment is a constant, reassuring presence, a portable sanctuary of heat in the midst of the frozen garden. From this central vantage point, the intricate design of the knot garden reveals itself in its winter skeletal form. The knots are composed of low, meticulously clipped hedges of boxwood, Buxus sempervirens, and dwarf yew. In the height of summer, these hedges are a dense, vibrant green, their intertwined patterns representing the complex, woven embroidery of a Tudor sleeve. Now they are transformed into a series of raised, white-capped ridges. The snow sits upon the flat tops of the hedges in a thick, uniform layer, perhaps 4 inches deep. Where the wind has gently scoured the surface, the dark, waxy leaves of the boxwood peek through, looking like tiny, emerald-colored scales. You begin to walk along the inner edge of the primary knot, a heart-shaped design that symbolizes constancy. The path here is narrower, constrained by the proximity of the hedges. You are forced to place one foot carefully in front of the other, a movement that increases your awareness of your own balance and the distribution of your weight. The snow here is deeper, having drifted slightly against the windward side of the boxwood. With each step, the snow rises to the top of your boots, the cold powder brushing against the leather with a soft, swishing sound. The smell of the garden is distinct at this proximity. It is the scent of sleeping evergreen, a sharp, resinous aroma that is both bitter and refreshing. It is a green smell, but one that has been muted and refined by the frost. It mingles with the faint, lingering scent of the damp earth beneath the snow and the ever-present, ghostly trail of wood smoke that drifts from the manor's many chimneys. You inhale deeply, feeling the cold air fill your lungs. It is a clean, sharp sensation, a reminder of the purity of the winter atmosphere. Each breath is a slow, meditative act, a rhythmic exchange between the internal warmth of your body and the external stillness of the world. You stop to examine a section of the hedge where the weaving pattern is particularly clear. The Tudor gardeners have trained the boxwood to dip under and over itself, creating a three-dimensional tapestry of living wood. You can see the thick, gnarled stems of the older plants, their bark a pale, silvery gray, crisscrossing like the threads of a giant loom. The snow has filled the gaps between the stems, creating a solid wall of white and gray. You reach out and gently press the top of the hedge. The snow is surprisingly firm, having been compacted by its own weight. It gives way slightly under your hand, but remains a cohesive mass. The silence of the garden is layered. There is the broad silence of the landscape, but within it there are smaller, more intimate silences. There is the silence of the dormant roots, held in the frozen grip of the soil. There is the silence of the sap, slowed to a near halt within the veins of the trees. And there is the silence of the air itself, which seems to have a physical weight, pressing gently against your skin and muffling the sounds of the distant world. You find yourself moving more slowly, as if any sudden gesture might shatter the fragile equilibrium of the morning. You turn your gaze back toward the manor house. From this distance, the building looks like a great, slumbering beast of stone and timber. The dark oak beams of the half-timbering create a stark, rhythmic grid against the lighter plaster. The roof is a vast, undulating expanse of slate, now completely hidden beneath a smooth, white mantle. Only the tall, decorative brick chimneys rise above the snow, their intricate barley twist designs etched clearly against the gray sky. From one of the chimneys, a thin, vertical line of blue-gray smoke rises straight up, undisturbed by any breeze. It is a sign of the life within, the great hall fire, the kitchens where bread is being baked, the private chambers where the warmth of the hearth provides a sanctuary from the frost. The sight of the smoke reinforces your own sense of coziness. You are outside in the heart of the winter, yet you are protected. The layers of linen, the heavy wool doublet, the fur-lined cloak, they form a series of thermal barriers that keep your body's heat close to your skin. Your face is the only part of you exposed to the elements, and even it feels a pleasant, tingling warmth as the blood circulates to meet the challenge of the cold. The tip of your nose is cold, and your cheeks are likely flushed a soft pink, but the core of your being is snug and secure. You continue your circuit of the knot garden, moving toward the eastern edge where the formal beds transition into a small orchard of medlar and quince trees. The transition is marked by a low stone wall, barely 2 feet high, which is now almost entirely submerged in a snowdrift. You step over the wall, the snow reaching mid-thigh for a brief moment, a soft, engulfing sensation that requires a bit of effort to push through. Once on the other side, the ground is flatter, and the snow is more uniform in depth. The orchard trees are small and gnarled, their branches twisting in evocative, calligraphic shapes. These are ancient varieties, chosen for their hardiness and the peculiar beauty of their winter silhouettes. The medlar trees, in particular, have a rugged, architectural quality. Their bark is deeply furrowed, providing a home for various mosses and lichens which are now dormant and frozen. You walk among the trees, your boots making a different sound here, a deeper, more hollow thud as the ground beneath the snow is less compacted than the garden paths. You find a quince tree whose branches are heavy with a thick coating of rime frost. This is not the fallen snow, but moisture from the air that has frozen directly onto the wood, creating a delicate, feathery fringe of white. Each tiny ice crystal is a perfect, translucent needle growing outward from the bark. You lean in to look at them closely, your breath threatening to melt the very thing you are admiring. The rime frost follows every contour of the branch, highlighting the texture of the bark and the sharp points of the dormant buds. It is a temporary, exquisite decoration, a gift of the freezing fog that must have rolled in during the night. The repetitive nature of the tree's trunk, branch, frost, snow creates a hypnotic visual rhythm. You find yourself counting the trees as you pass them, a mental exercise that further settles your mind. 1, 2, 3. The numbers are a silent internal monologue that matches the pace of your footsteps. The orchard is a place of utility and beauty, a storehouse of future fruit, now resting in the profound slumber of the winter. There is no urgency for the trees to grow, no demand for them to produce. They simply exist in a state of pure, uncomplicated being. As you reach the far side of the orchard, you come to a small wooden gate that leads out toward the wider estate. The gate is made of simple oak pales, weathered to a silver gray. It is frozen shut, the latch encased in a thick globule of clear ice. You don't attempt to open it. Instead, you lean against the sturdy gate post, feeling the solid, unyielding wood through your cloak. From here, you can look out across the white fields toward the distant woods. The fields are a vast, featureless sea of white, the boundaries of the hedges and ditches erased by the snow. The woods in the distance are a hazy, charcoal gray smudge against the horizon, their individual trees blurred into a single, soft mass. The scale of the winter landscape is humbling. It is a world reduced to its essential elements: earth, sky, water, and wood. The complexity of the summer, with its infinite shades of green and its constant movement, has been stripped away, leaving behind a stark, minimalist beauty. You find this simplicity deeply soothing. There is nothing to demand your attention, nothing to stimulate your senses beyond the immediate physical experience of the walk. You are free to simply observe, to feel the weight of your clothes, the rhythm of your breath, and the cold, clean air on your skin. You remain by the gate for several minutes, the stillness of your body matching the stillness of the landscape. The only movement is the slow, rhythmic expansion and contraction of your chest as you breathe. You observe the way a single flake of snow, perhaps dislodged from a branch above, drifts slowly down to land on the dark sleeve of your cloak. It is a perfect, six-pointed star, a masterpiece of natural geometry. For a few seconds it rests there, a tiny, brilliant speck of white against the indigo wool. Then, as the warmth of your body slowly permeates the fabric, the flake begins to lose its shape. The sharp edges soften, the points retract, and it turns into a minute, glistening bead of water before vanishing into the fibers of the wool. This small, localized event, the birth and death of a snowflake, is the only drama the garden offers. It is enough. You feel a deep sense of contentment, a quiet joy in the observation of such mundane, beautiful things. The walk has served its purpose, drawing you away from the concerns of the house and into the slow, steady pulse of the natural world. You push yourself away from the gate post, the movement slow and deliberate. Your boots make a soft, sliding sound as you turn back toward the orchard and the knot garden beyond. The return journey will be a mirror of the first, a retracing of your steps through the white corridors of the Tudor landscape. You look forward to the repetitive crunch of the snow, the familiar scent of the boxwood, and the gradual approach of the manor house, whose warm, amber-lit windows will eventually welcome you back from the cold. The turn away from the orchard gate is a slow, rotational movement, a pivot of the heels that sends a fresh, sharp series of crunches through the silence. You begin your return journey, retracing the broad, white expanse of the orchard floor toward the high, sheltering walls of the formal garden. The perspective has shifted, where before you looked out toward the infinite, misty horizon of the English countryside, you now face the towering, reassuring bulk of the manor house and its flanking structures. The house appears as a collection of dark, geometric shapes, sharp gables, soaring chimneys, and the rhythmic, repetitive grid of the leaded windows, all set against the unrelenting, soft gray of the winter sky. To your right, the great southern wall of the garden rises, a formidable expanse of Tudor brickwork that serves as a thermal reservoir for the entire estate. You drift closer to it, drawn by the visual complexity of the masonry. The wall is constructed in the traditional English bond, a pattern of alternating rows of stretchers and headers that creates a rhythmic, interlocking strength. These bricks are not the uniform, machine-made blocks of a later era, but are the individual products of a local clay pit, hand-molded and fired in wood-burning kilns. Consequently, no two bricks are identical. Some are a deep, bruised purple, almost black where the heat of the kiln was most intense. Others are a pale, dusty terracotta or a rich, vibrant ochre. As you walk alongside the wall, you observe the way the frost has interacted with the porous surface of the clay. In the tiny pits and fissures of the brick, microscopic droplets of moisture have frozen and expanded, creating minute crystalline explosions that have, over the centuries, softened the sharp edges of the masonry. The mortar between the bricks, a mixture of lime, sharp sand, and perhaps a measure of horsehair for binding, is a pale, creamy gray. It has receded slightly from the surface of the brick, creating a network of shallow channels where the snow has found a precarious footing. You reach out a gloved hand and let your fingertips trail lightly along the surface of the wall. The texture is rough and abrasive, a gritty landscape of mineral peaks and valleys that vibrates through the thick buckskin of your glove. The sound of your glove against the brick is a dry, rasping whisper, a tiny friction that seems loud in the encompassing stillness. You stop for a moment to examine a particular brick that has a small, thumb-sized indentation in its center, perhaps the mark of a workman who handled the clay while it was still wet 4 generations ago. The indentation is now a miniature bowl, holding a perfectly spherical globule of ice. You look at the ice, marveling at its clarity. It is like a lens, refracting the dull light of the sky and magnifying the texture of the clay beneath it. This small, forgotten detail becomes the center of your world for several minutes, a silent witness to the passage of time and the enduring nature of the elements. As you continue along the wall, you encounter the first of the great buttresses, thick, sloping piers of masonry designed to support the weight of the wall against the pressure of the earth and the wind. The snow has drifted deep into the internal corners where the buttress meets the wall, forming steep, curving ramps of white. You observe the way the wind, though now silent, has sculpted the snow into elegant, aerodynamic shapes. The surface of the drift is marked by tiny, parallel ripples, like the sand on a beach after the tide has gone out. The edges of the drift are sharp and crystalline, tapering down to a single, translucent layer of ice where it touches the brick. The walk remains a study in slow, rhythmic progression. Your boots continue their predictable cycle: the lift, the suspension, the descent, and the satisfying scritch crunch as the elm sole meets the frozen surface. You become highly attuned to the variations in the ground beneath the snow. Sometimes you feel the hard, unyielding resistance of a buried flagstone. At other times, the ground feels softer, more forgiving, where the soil of a flower bed has been loosened by the autumn's digging. The change in texture is communicated through the soles of your boots, a series of subtle vibrations that inform your body of the landscape's hidden geography. You arrive at a section of the wall where a lead cistern stands, a heavy, utilitarian object that has become a decorative feature over the years. The cistern is a large, rectangular tank, cast from thick sheets of lead and decorated with relief carvings of stylized lilies and Tudor roses. It is meant to collect rainwater from the roof of the manor, but now it is a solid block of ice. The surface of the water inside has frozen into a series of concentric rings, marking the stages of the freeze. The lead itself is a dull, somber gray, its surface oxidized to a velvety matte finish. You touch the rim of the cistern, and the metal is shockingly cold, a deep, penetrating chill that seems to bypass the leather of your glove and settle into your bones. Above the cistern, a lead downpipe descends from the eaves, its joints marked by decorative hopper heads shaped like inverted bells. The pipe is coated in a thin glaze of clear ice, a frozen waterfall that has captured the last few drops of a winter thaw. You watch as a single drop of water, warmed perhaps by the faint heat escaping from a nearby window, trembles at the tip of an icicle. It hangs there, a shimmering, translucent pearl, suspended by the forces of surface tension. It doesn't fall. It simply exists, a moment of liquid potential held in the grip of the frost. You wait, your breath coming in slow, steady clouds, watching the drop. The world seems to shrink down to this single, precarious sphere of water. Seconds pass, then a minute. The drop remains. The stillness of the garden is so profound that even the movement of a single drop of water would feel like a momentous event. Eventually, you turn your gaze back to the path. The lead cistern and its frozen cargo are left behind as you move toward the entrance of the long walk, a straight alley of lime trees that leads toward the northern boundary of the garden. The lime trees have been pleached, their branches woven together to form a high, aerial hedge. In the summer, this creates a shaded, leafy tunnel, but now it is a skeletal arcade of dark, interlacing wood. The snow has settled on every horizontal branch, creating a delicate white lattice overhead. You walk beneath this canopy, and the light changes, becoming even more diffused and ethereal. The trees are old, their trunks thick and deeply fissured. The bark is a dark, charcoal gray, marked by patches of pale green lichen that look like frozen maps. You stop to examine the trunk of one tree, noticing how the snow has filled the deep vertical cracks in the bark, creating a series of white stripes against the dark wood. You run your hand over the trunk, feeling the immense strength and solidity of the tree. It is a living thing, but its life is currently internal, a slow, subterranean pulse that is hidden from the world. You feel a sense of kinship with the tree, both of you standing silent and resilient against the winter. The alley of lime trees is long, and the repetition of the trunks provides a hypnotic rhythm to your walk. Tree, snow, path, tree, snow, path. The world becomes a series of vertical and horizontal lines, a minimalist composition in black, white, and gray. You find your thoughts slowing down, drifting like the snowflakes that occasionally fall from the branches above. There is no need for complex thought here, no need for planning or worry. The garden provides everything you need: a path to follow, a wall to shelter you, and a silence that invites the mind to rest. You notice the way your clothing continues to perform its vital function. The heavy wool of your cloak is a barrier, but it is also a reservoir of heat. You can feel the warmth of your own body trapped within the fibers, a soft, radiating glow that keeps the core of your being comfortable. The linen of your shirt, though hidden beneath the doublet, is a gentle, dry layer against your skin. The buckskin of your gloves has warmed up through the movement of your hands, the leather becoming more supple and compliant. You are a self-contained unit of warmth, a mobile hearth moving through a frozen world. This realization brings a deep sense of satisfaction, a primal comfort in the efficacy of your shelter. As you reach the end of the lime walk, you come to a small, circular clearing where a stone fountain sits. The fountain is a simple design, a shallow basin supported by 3 carved dolphins. Like the cistern, it is frozen silent. The central jet, which in the spring would send a plume of sparkling water into the air, is now a jagged spire of ice, several inches thick. The dolphins are draped in white, their tails disappearing into the frozen depths of the basin. You stand by the fountain, listening to the absolute lack of sound. In the summer, this place would be filled with the musical splash of water and the hum of insects. Now, the silence is so thick you can almost hear the crystalline structure of the ice as it deepens. You look down into the basin. Beneath the clear ice, you can see the bottom of the fountain, covered in a layer of dark, decaying leaves from the autumn. They are frozen in place, a subaquatic tapestry of browns and tans. A single oak leaf, its edges curled and its veins prominent, is trapped just an inch below the surface. It looks like a specimen in a museum, preserved for eternity in a block of transparent stone. You spend some time tracing the outline of the leaf through the ice, your mind wandering through the history of that leaf, its birth in the spring, its green glory in the summer, its slow drift to the water in the autumn, and now its long, frozen sleep. The air remains perfectly still. There is no wind to stir the branches or to move the drifts of snow. The only movement is the slow, periodic descent of a tiny, feathery flake of frost from the trees above, which drifts down with agonizing slowness to join its companions on the ground. You watch one such flake as it falls. It doesn't move in a straight line, but oscillates back and forth, caught in minute, invisible currents of air. It lands on the rim of the fountain basin, a microscopic addition to the vast landscape of white. You begin to walk again, moving away from the fountain and toward the western wall of the garden. This wall is lower, and beyond it lies the kitchen garden, where the practical business of the estate is carried out. You can see the rows of humped earth where the winter vegetables, leeks, parsnips, and cabbages are buried beneath the snow. The kitchen garden lacks the formal elegance of the knot garden, but it has its own rugged beauty. The structures of the bean poles, now stripped of their vines, look like a forest of tiny skeletal masts. The cold frames, their glass lids covered in a thick layer of frost, look like small, sunken houses. The walk alongside the kitchen garden wall is a transition back toward the utilitarian heart of the manor. You pass a small wooden shed where the gardeners keep their tools. The door is slightly ajar, and you can see the dark interior, smelling of dry earth, rusted iron, and seasoned wood. A row of wooden-handled spades and rakes leans against the wall, their metal heads dull and cold. You imagine the hands that have held those tools, the rhythmic labor of digging and planting that sustains the life of the house. Now, those hands are likely warming themselves by a fire in the servants' quarters, and the tools are enjoying their own winter rest. The repetitive nature of your observations, the bricks, the trees, the ice, the tools, creates a sense of profound boredom, but it is a comfortable, meditative boredom. It is the boredom of a mind that has no problems to solve, no tasks to complete. You are simply a witness to the state of the world in the dead of winter. The monotony is hypnotic, a steady, unchanging drone that lulls your senses and quietens your internal monologue. You are part of the landscape, as silent and as still as the stone dolphins or the frozen oak leaf. As you approach the corner of the western wall, you see the outlines of the manor house once again, closer now. The amber light from the windows seems brighter as the day remains stubbornly gray. You can see the individual panes of glass, each one a tiny, glowing rectangle of warmth. You know that soon you will be back inside, shed of your heavy cloak and your sturdy boots, sitting by the fire with a cup of spiced ale. But for now, you linger in the cold, savoring the contrast between the frozen exterior and the imagined warmth of the interior. The walk is not yet over, and you are in no hurry for it to end. The transition from the kitchen garden to the physic garden is marked by a small, arched gateway set into the western wall. This arch is an exercise in Tudor masonry, constructed from narrow, hand-pressed bricks that curve upward to a central point, a subtle nod to the Gothic influences that still lingered in the architecture of the 16th century. The gate itself is a heavy affair of solid hearthav oak, weathered by decades of English rain and frost to a beautiful silvery gray patina. You reach out to the latch, a simple thumb piece of wrought iron. The metal is incredibly cold, the frost having formed a thin, almost invisible layer of rime over the iron. As you press your thumb down, there is a distinct, muffled clack, the sound of the heavy bar lifting from its cradle. It is a slow, mechanical sound, one that speaks of weight and permanence. The hinges of the gate are long, horizontal straps of iron, bolted through the oak with heavy, square-headed rivets. As you push the gate open, they emit a low, resonant groan, a sound that seems to vibrate through the very air. It is a slow, protesting noise, the sound of metal moving against metal in the deep cold. You step through the threshold, and the gate swings shut behind you with a soft, heavy thud that is immediately swallowed by the snow. You are now within the physic garden, a space dedicated to the cultivation of medicinal herbs, aromatic plants, and the various simples, required by the manor's apothecary and stillroom maid. The layout of the physic garden is a series of raised rectangular beds, each bordered by low timbers of seasoned elm. In the summer, these beds would be a riot of textures and scents: the silvery blue of lavender, the deep green of rosemary, the feathery fronds of fennel, and the pungent, broad leaves of sage. Now the garden is a study in dormant architecture. The snow has filled the beds to the brim, creating a series of uniform, white platforms. Only the most resilient of the woody perennials remain visible, their skeletal forms rising above the snow like tiny, frozen sculptures. You walk toward a large rosemary bush that stands in the corner of the garden, sheltered by the convergence of two brick walls. The rosemary is an old plant, its trunk thick and twisted, its bark peeling in long, thin strips like parchment. Its needle-like leaves are a dark, somber green, almost black against the white of the snow. You reach out and brush your gloved hand against one of the branches. The movement releases a faint, ghostly scent, the sharp, resinous aroma of the herb, a memory of warmth and vitality preserved in the deep freeze. It is a subtle smell, one that requires you to lean in close, your breath mingling with the aromatic oils. The scent is comforting, a familiar culinary and medicinal note in a world that has otherwise become scentless and cold. Near the base of the rosemary bush, you notice the way the gardeners have prepared for the winter. A thick layer of wheat straw has been tucked around the roots of the more sensitive plants, a golden gray mulch that provides a pocket of insulated air against the freezing ground. You look at the straw closely, observing the individual stalks. Each one is a hollow tube of cellulose, a remnant of the summer harvest. They are brittle and dry, and when you step near them, the snow-covered straw makes a soft, crunching sound, a hollow, rustling noise that is distinct from the solid scritch of the snow on the paths. The straw represents a vital piece of Tudor logistics, the careful management of resources to ensure the survival of the estate through the lean months. You move along the central path of the physic garden, your footsteps rhythmic and slow. The path is made of crushed brick and lime mortar, now hidden beneath several inches of powdery snow. You feel the slight crunch of the grit beneath the snow through the thick elm soles of your boots. It is a tactile reminder of the garden's construction, a sense of the solid foundation that lies beneath the ephemeral white. The air in this enclosed space feels even stiller than in the knot garden, held fast by the high walls and the dense hedges of holly that form the northern boundary. To your left, you see a row of bell jars or glass cloches, used to protect the most delicate seedlings. These are large, hand-blown domes of greenish glass, each one unique in its shape and thickness. They look like giant, frozen bubbles resting on the snow. The glass is covered in a thick layer of internal condensation that has frozen into intricate, fern-like patterns of frost. You cannot see the plants within, but you know they are there, held in a state of suspended animation, protected from the biting wind by the fragile barrier of the glass. You spend a moment observing the way the pale light catches the irregularities in the hand-blown glass, creating tiny rainbows of refracted color in the frozen droplets. The silence is punctuated only by the sound of your own existence, the rustle of your wool cloak against your heavy breeches, a soft, rhythmic swish-swish, and the steady, rhythmic intake and exhale of your breath. You become fascinated by the plumes of white vapor that escape your mouth. They are thick and opaque at first, swirling in the air before slowly thinning and disappearing. You experiment with your breathing, taking a long, slow inhalation and then a sharp, quick exhale. The vapor follows your command, a visual representation of your internal heat meeting the external cold. It is a private, hypnotic performance, a way to pass the time as you move through the silent garden. You reach a small stone bench, tucked into a shallow alcove in the wall. The bench is made of a single, massive slab of Purbeck marble, a dark, fossiliferous stone that has been polished by centuries of use. It is capped with a thick, untouched layer of snow, perhaps 5 inches deep. You do not sit, for the cold of the stone would quickly bypass your layers of wool and linen, but you admire the perfection of the snow's surface. It is completely smooth, a flawless white cushion that hides the dark, ancient stone beneath. You notice a single, tiny bird footprint on the edge of the snow, a delicate, 3-pronged mark left by a robin or a wren. The bird is long gone, but the mark remains, a temporary record of a life lived in the margins of the winter. Turning back toward the center of the garden, you observe the skeletal beauty of the dormant plants. The lavender bushes are rounded mounds of white, their long, dried flower stalks poking through the snow like the quills of a porcupine. The sage, with its dusty, gray-green leaves, looks like a cluster of frozen velvet. Everything is held in a state of perfect preservation, a museum of botanical forms. You find this lack of growth, this absence of change, deeply restful. There is nothing for you to do here, no plants to prune, no weeds to pull. The garden is taking care of itself, resting and gathering its strength for the eventual return of the sun. You begin to walk toward the holly hedge that marks the northern end of the physic garden. The holly is a king holly, with deep, glossy green leaves and a profusion of brilliant red berries. The snow has settled on the upper surfaces of the leaves, but the berries peek through, looking like drops of blood on a white sheet. The hedge is thick and impenetrable, its prickly leaves a formidable barrier against any intruder. You look at the berries, noting their smooth, waxy skin and the way they provide a vital source of food for the birds that remain through the winter. The contrast of colors, the deep green, the brilliant red, and the pure white, is the only visual stimulation in an otherwise monochromatic world. As you stand by the holly hedge, you notice a subtle change in the light. The gray sky seems to be thinning in the west, and a pale, watery yellow is beginning to bleed through the clouds. It is not the bright, direct light of the sun, but a soft, diffused glow that gives the snow a pearlescent quality. The shadows, which have been non-existent all morning, begin to appear as faint, blue-gray smudges on the ground. This shift in the light is slow and subtle, a gradual transition that changes the entire mood of the garden. The manor house, seen through the gap in the hedge, now has a slight golden tint to its stone walls. You decide to follow the path that runs along the base of the holly hedge. The ground here is more sheltered, and the snow is shallower, revealing the dark, damp earth of the garden beds. You can smell the soil, a rich, earthy scent that is the very essence of the garden. It is a smell of decay and potential, of the organic matter that is slowly being broken down to provide the nutrients for the spring. You find this smell deeply grounding, a reminder of the cycle of life that continues even in the depths of winter. The path leads you back toward the main axis of the garden. As you walk, you find yourself counting your steps again. 1, 2, 3, 4. The numbers become a mantra, a rhythmic internal clock that keeps time with your heart. You are in no rush to leave the physic garden. The stillness and the silence have a gravitational pull, holding you in a state of quiet contemplation. You are a solitary observer, a witness to the slow, steady pulse of the Tudor winter. You reach the end of the holly hedge and turn back toward the arched gateway. The garden looks different from this perspective, the lines of the beds and the paths converging toward the center. You notice the way your own footprints have marked the path you took, a dark, irregular trail in the pristine snow. They are the only sign of movement in the garden, a record of your journey through this frozen world. You follow your own trail back, placing your feet into the existing hollows, a process that requires focus and balance. The gateway is once again before you. You reach for the iron latch, feeling its familiar, biting cold. The click of the latch and the groan of the hinges are the only sounds as you exit the physic garden and re-enter the main garden area. The manor house is closer now, its towering presence a reminder of the warmth and the comfort that await you. But before you return, there is one final section of the garden to explore, the long, shaded walk that leads toward the orchard. You turn your steps in that direction, the rhythmic crunch of the snow once again becoming the soundtrack to your walk. The transition from the open, geometric precision of the physic garden to the entrance of the long yew walk is marked by a sudden, perceptible shift in the quality of the light and the texture of the silence. This corridor of ancient evergreens is one of the oldest features of the manor's grounds, planted perhaps in the reign of the first Tudor king. And over the decades, the trees have grown into a singular, monumental entity. The entrance is a natural archway, formed by the interlacing branches of two sentinel yews, their needles so dense and dark that they seem to absorb what little remains of the winter daylight. You pause at this threshold, your boots resting on a patch of ground where the snow is thin and patchy, protected by the heavy eaves of the trees above. You look up into the cathedral-like interior of the yew walk. The ceiling is a complex, chaotic web of dark, muscular limbs, stretching and twisting in a silent, slow-motion struggle for the light. The needles are a deep, somber green, almost a charcoal black in the shadows, and they carry a weight of snow that has sifted through the upper canopy to settle in soft, white pillows on the horizontal branches. The air here feels heavier, more insulated. The walls of the walk are composed of the trunks themselves, massive and deeply furrowed, like the columns of a subterranean hall. You step forward, and the sound of your movement changes instantly. The crisp, crystalline crunch of the open garden is replaced by a soft, hollow thud as your elm soles meet the thick layer of fallen needles and leaf mold that lies beneath a dusting of fine, powdery snow. This change in acoustics is hypnotic. The sound is muffled, domestic, as if you have stepped onto a heavy wool carpet in a darkened room. You begin to walk down the center of the arcade, your pace slowing naturally to match the solemnity of the space. Each step is a deliberate, rhythmic pressure. You feel the springiness of the needle bed beneath the soles of your boots, a subtle, yielding resistance that is kinder to the feet than the frozen stone of the terrace. You become aware of the scent of the yew, a dry, ancient smell, faintly medicinal and deeply earthy. It is the scent of a tree that can live for 1,000 years, a smell that speaks of endurance and the slow, inexorable passage of centuries. You stop beside one of the largest trees to examine its bark. The trunk is a magnificent, sculptural mass of red-brown wood, twisting upward in a slow spiral. The bark does not grow in smooth sheets, but in long, vertical ribbons that peel and flake away to reveal the smoother, lighter wood beneath. You reach out a gloved hand and touch the surface. The bark is surprisingly dry and papery, clicking softly under the pressure of your buckskin-clad finger. You can feel the ridges and valleys of the wood, a topographical map of the tree's long life. In the deep fissures of the bark, tiny pockets of snow have collected, looking like veins of white marble running through the dark timber. You spend a long time tracing one such fissure, your mind wandering through the slow, silent growth of the wood, ring by ring, year by year. The light in the yew walk is filtered and ethereal. Every few yards, there is a gap in the canopy, a window through which a shaft of pale, gray light falls onto the path. These shafts are filled with a slow-motion dance of dust motes and tiny, microscopic ice crystals, suspended in the still air. When you pass through one of these patches of light, you feel a momentary ghost-like warmth on the side of your face, not enough to truly heat the skin, but enough to remind you of the sun's existence somewhere beyond the clouds. Then, you step back into the deep, cool shadow of the yews, and the bracing chill of the winter returns, settling against your cheeks like a soft, invisible veil. Your clothing remains your constant companion, a reliable shield against the environment. You find yourself focusing on the tactile sensations of your attire as you walk. You can feel the rhythmic brush of the indigo wool cloak against the backs of your calves, a heavy, rhythmic swish-swish that accompanies your footsteps. The cloak is a marvel of Tudor textile engineering. The wool has been fulled, shrunk and thickened through a process of beating and washing, until it is nearly windproof. You can feel the density of the fabric as it drapes around you, a substantial, comforting weight that prevents the cold from leaching away your body's vital heat. Beneath the cloak, your doublet of quilted fustian provides another layer of insulation, its thick padding trapping a layer of air that has been warmed by your own movement. You notice the feeling of your hands within your buckskin gloves. The leather has become warm and supple, molded to the shape of your fingers through the repetitive motions of your walk. You flex your fingers, listening to the faint, melodic creak of the leather, a dry, sliding sound that is one of the few breaks in the silence of the arcade. You find a strange satisfaction in the efficacy of your gear. Everything is functioning exactly as it should. The boots are dry, the wool is warm, the leather is protective. This sense of physical security allows your mind to drift even further into a state of calm, meditative observation. Halfway down the yew walk, you encounter a stone bench, much like the ones in the other gardens, but this one is carved from a single block of dark, weathered granite. Because it sits deep within the shade of the trees, it has accumulated very little snow. Instead, it is covered in a fine, crystalline glaze of hoarfrost. Each individual frost crystal is a tiny, geometric masterpiece, a miniature forest of ice needles standing perfectly upright on the stone. You lean in close, your breath forming a thick white cloud that briefly obscures your vision. As the cloud clears, you see the frost crystals begin to soften and lean away from the warmth of your breath. They are so fragile, so temporary. You watch as a small patch of the granite is revealed, its surface dark and speckled with grains of quartz and mica that glint like frozen stars. You do not sit, but you rest your gloved hand on the back of the bench for a moment. The cold of the granite is intense, a sharp, biting sensation that travels through the leather and into the palm of your hand. It is a reminder of the true power of the winter, a force that can turn the hardest stone into a source of bone-chilling cold. You withdraw your hand and tuck it back into the folds of your cloak, savoring the immediate return of warmth as your body heat reasserts itself. The contrast between the freezing stone and the warm wool is a source of quiet pleasure, a sensory confirmation of your own comfort. You continue your walk, the long corridor of yews stretching out before you like a tunnel leading back in time. The monotony of the trees, trunk, shadow, light, trunk, is deeply hypnotic. You find yourself matching your breathing to your footsteps, 4 steps for an inhalation, 4 steps for an exhalation. This rhythmic synchronization further settles your mind, pushing away any stray thoughts or worries. There is only the path, the trees, and the air. You are a slow-moving part of a larger, stationary world. Ahead, the yew walk opens out into a small, circular clearing known as the quietude. In the center of this clearing stands a sundial, different from the one in the knot garden. This one is a spherical dial, a skeleton of bronze rings representing the celestial equator and the paths of the planets, held aloft by a stone pedestal. The bronze rings are thick with frost, making them look like white, ghostly orbits suspended in the air. The snow in the clearing is deeper than in the walk, having been allowed to fall directly from the sky. It lies in a smooth, unblemished sheet, a perfect circle of white surrounded by the dark, towering walls of the yews. You walk toward the dial, your boots once again making that sharp, rhythmic crunch as you leave the needle-littered floor of the arcade and re-enter the snow. The sound seems amplified in the small, enclosed clearing, echoing softly off the dense foliage. You reach the dial and stand before it, observing the way the frozen bronze rings intersect. There is no shadow here, no movement of the heavens to be recorded. Time in the quietude is a stagnant, frozen thing. You look at the stone pedestal, which is carved with a simple Latin inscription, now almost entirely obscured by a crust of ice. You can just make out the word silentium, silence. It is an appropriate motto for this place, where the world seems to have reached its absolute point of rest. You spend a long time standing by the dial, simply breathing. The air is so still that you can hear the faint, crystalline tinkle of a tiny piece of ice falling from a yew branch and hitting the frozen bronze of the dial. It is a sound so small, so delicate, that you would never have heard it in any other season. It is a sound that requires the absolute absence of wind and the total focus of the listener. You find yourself waiting, hoping to hear it again. You stand motionless, a dark indigo-clad statue in a world of white and green. Minutes pass. Your breath rises in a steady, rhythmic plume. Your heart beats a slow, calm tattoo in your chest. The silence of the quietude wraps around you like a heavy, velvet blanket. Eventually, you hear it again, a soft, metallic chime as another fragment of frost dislodges itself. It is enough. You feel a sense of completion, a satisfaction that comes from having witnessed a minute hidden event in the life of the garden. You turn your steps away from the dial and begin to walk toward the far end of the clearing, where a narrow gap in the yews leads toward the boundary of the formal grounds and the edge of the great pond. The path becomes narrower here, the yew branches brushing against your shoulders as you pass. You can feel the stiff, prickly texture of the needles through the wool of your cloak. The branches are heavy with their burden of snow, and as you move past, a small shower of white powder falls onto your hood and shoulders. You don't brush it off. You let it sit there, a layer of natural insulation. The snow is light and dry like flour, and it doesn't melt, but simply rests on the surface of the wool, adding its own weight to your garment. As you emerge from the yew walk, the landscape opens up once more. Before you lies the great pond, a large, rectangular body of water that serves as a reservoir and a reflective mirror for the manor house. In the summer, it is a place of lilies and dragonflies, the water a dark, peat-stained brown. Now it is a vast, flat expanse of white. The entire surface has frozen solid, and a thick layer of snow has fallen on top of the ice, erasing the boundary between the water and the land. Only the tall, dry reeds at the water's edge, their seed heads heavy with frost, indicate where the pond begins. You walk toward the edge of the pond, your boots sinking into the deeper snow of the bank. The air feels colder here, more exposed. There is a faint, almost imperceptible movement of air coming off the flat surface of the ice, not quite a wind, but a drift of cold that brushes against your face. You stop at the very edge where the stone coping of the pond is buried. You look out across the white expanse. It is perfectly level, a mathematical plane of snow. In the distance, you can see the far bank, marked by a row of pollarded willows, their orange-red stems looking like frozen flames against the gray sky. The pond is a place of profound horizontal silence. There is no movement beneath the ice, no ripple on the surface. The fish are huddled in the deep, muddy bottom, their metabolism slowed to a near crawl, waiting for the thaw. You find this image of hidden underwater life deeply comforting. Even in the heart of the freeze, life persists, tucked away in the dark, quiet places. You stand for a long time, looking out over the ice, your thoughts as still and as flat as the pond itself. The manor house, visible in the distance, seems like a faraway dream, a place of light and warmth that belongs to a different world. For now, you are a creature of the cold, a solitary walker in a landscape of frozen water and ancient trees. You turn your gaze from the vast, white expanse of the great pond, where the horizontal silence seems to have no end, and begin to move your weight from one foot to the other. This movement is slow and rhythmic, a deliberate shifting of your center of gravity that causes the thick elm soles of your boots to settle deeper into the soft, unblemished powder of the bank. The snow here has drifted, forming a gentle, sloping embankment that rises toward the stone perimeter of the formal grounds. As you lift your right foot, there is a distinct, suction-like sound, a soft, wet thwack as the leather breaks free from the slightly damp lower layer of snow, followed immediately by the familiar, dry crunch as you place it down again on the pristine surface. Your path now leads you toward the great dovecote, a monumental structure of stone and timber that stands as a testament to the manor's self-sufficiency. It is an octagonal building, rising 3 stories high, its walls constructed from the same honey-colored limestone that forms the main house. Even from a distance, you can see the complexity of the masonry. The stones are large and irregular, held together by thick ribbons of lime mortar that have been weathered into a deep, textured gray. You walk toward it with a sense of purpose that is entirely devoid of haste. There is no reason to hurry. The winter day is short, and the light is consistent in its dim, silver-gray quality. Every step is an observation, a slow-motion study in texture and sound. As you draw closer to the dovecote, you notice the way the snow has interacted with its architectural features. The building has a steeply pitched roof of hand-cut stone tiles, which are now completely hidden beneath a thick, undulating blanket of white. The snow has gathered in the eaves, forming long, graceful curves that hang over the walls like a frozen wave. From these eaves, a series of icicles has descended. They are not the sharp, jagged spikes of a sudden freeze, but long, rounded cylinders of ice, formed by the slow, rhythmic dripping of a brief midday thaw that has since been recaptured by the frost. You stop beneath the overhang, looking up at these translucent pillars. They are filled with tiny air bubbles, frozen in place like pearls in a glass of water. Each bubble is a minute pocket of air from a time when the world was slightly warmer, now held in a crystalline prison. The smell near the dovecote is different from the rest of the garden. It is a warmer, more organic scent, a mixture of dry straw, old wood, and the faint, dusty aroma of feathers. Even though the birds are mostly silent, their presence is felt in the subtle shift of the atmosphere. The air here feels slightly less sharp, perhaps tempered by the collective body heat of the hundreds of pigeons and doves that nest within the stone walls. You reach the heavy door of the dovecote, which is made of thick planks of seasoned elm, reinforced with iron studs. The wood is dry and silvered, its grain standing out in sharp relief. You run your gloved hand over the surface, feeling the ridges and valleys of the timber. The wood is cold, but it lacks the biting, metallic chill of the iron latch. You decide not to enter, but instead to walk around the perimeter of the building. The ground here is sheltered, and the snow is thinner, allowing you to see the individual pebbles and stones that make up the foundation. You notice a small patch of frosted moss clinging to a north-facing stone, a vibrant, emerald green splash of color in an otherwise monochromatic world. The moss is covered in a delicate layer of hoarfrost, each tiny filament of the plant encased in a microscopic sheath of ice. You lean in close, your breath forming a thick white plume that briefly obscures the moss. As the mist clears, you see the ice crystals begin to glisten in the pale light. The level of detail is overwhelming, yet soothing. There is so much beauty in these small, ignored corners of the estate. The walk around the dovecote is a slow, circular progression. You find yourself counting the sides of the octagon. 1, 2, 3. The numbers are a silent, rhythmic pulse in your mind. Between each side, there is a thick stone buttress, its sloping top covered in a neat cap of snow. You observe the way the wind has scoured the snow on these slopes, creating a series of tiny, parallel ridges that look like the ripples on a desert dune. The geometry of the building is perfect, a mathematical harmony that provides a sense of order and stability. In this frozen world, where the boundaries of the land and water are blurred, the solid, unyielding stone of the dovecote is a reassuring presence. Leaving the dovecote behind, you turn back toward the main garden axis, moving toward the sunken terrace. This area of the garden is lower than the surrounding lawns, designed to trap the warmth of the sun and provide a sheltered space for delicate plants. Today, it is a reservoir of cold, a deep basin of white that seems to collect the silence of the morning. To reach it, you must descend a flight of broad, shallow steps made of weathered sandstone. The steps are treacherous, covered in a thin, invisible layer of black ice beneath the dusting of snow. You move with extreme caution, placing each foot with deliberate precision. You feel the muscles in your thighs and calves tensing as you balance your weight, a slow, physical engagement with the landscape. The sound of your boots on the sandstone is a sharp, grinding noise, the grit of the stone meeting the hardness of the elm's soul. It is a gritty, percussive sound that echoes off the low stone walls of the terrace. You take one step, pause, and wait for the sound to die away completely before taking the next. This rhythmic descent is a form of meditation, a way to focus the mind on the immediate physical reality of the moment. You are not thinking about the past or the future. You are only thinking about the next step, the next breath, the next inch of progress through the snow. Once you reach the bottom of the steps, you find yourself in a world of profound enclosure. The sunken terrace is surrounded by walls of brick and stone, which rise to the height of your chest. The air here is perfectly still, devoid of even the slightest movement. The snow is deep and level, a vast white carpet that has filled the space from wall to wall. In the center of the terrace stands a large, laid-cast urn, decorated with relief carvings of grapes and vine leaves. The urn is filled with snow, which has risen above the rim to form a soft, rounded dome. It looks like a giant, frozen dessert, a white confection set in a bowl of dark, oxidized metal. You walk toward the urn, your footsteps leaving deep, dark hollows in the pristine snow. The effort of walking through the deep powder is significant, but it is a slow, steady exertion that generates a pleasant warmth within your cloak. You can feel the heat radiating from your chest, trapped by the layers of wool and fustian. Your breath comes in slow, deep cycles, a rhythmic bellows that fuels your internal hearth. You reach the urn and stand beside it, resting your gloved hand on the cold, textured lead. You trace the outline of a carved grape with your finger, feeling the smooth, rounded shape of the metal. The lead is a dull, somber gray, its surface pitted and weathered by a century of English winters. You look around the terrace, observing the dormant plants that are tucked into the crevices of the walls. There are small ferns, their fronds now brown and brittle, looking like delicate lace. There are alpine plants, their low cushions of silver-gray leaves barely visible beneath the snow. Everything is at rest, held in a state of perfect, frozen preservation. You find the lack of movement deeply comforting. There is no growth, no decay, no change. The world has reached a point of absolute stasis, a moment of eternal stillness. You stay in the sunken terrace for a long time, simply existing in the silence. Your thoughts begin to drift, moving as slowly as the clouds in the sky. You think about the history of this garden, the generations of people who have walked these paths and breathed this air. You think about the gardeners who built these walls and planted these trees, their lives defined by the slow, rhythmic cycle of the seasons. You feel a sense of connection to them, a shared experience of the English landscape in the depth of winter. The Tudor world is not a distant history, but a physical reality that you are experiencing through your senses. The smell of the smoke, the feel of the wool, the sound of the snow. Eventually, you decide to move on, leaving the sunken terrace and its leaden urn behind. You climb the steps on the opposite side, the exertion once again warming your body. As you reach the top, you find yourself at the entrance to the Hornbeam Maze. This is a large, complex structure of high hedges, designed for amusement and contemplation. In the summer, the hornbeam is a dense wall of green leaves, but in the winter, the trees retain their dead, brown leaves, creating a unique, textured appearance. The leaves are a deep, rust-colored tan, and they rattle in the slightest breeze with a dry, papery sound. Today, however, there is no breeze. The maze is silent. You enter the first corridor and the world immediately changes. The walls of dead leaves rise 10 feet above your head, creating a narrow, winding path of white and tan. The snow has drifted into the maze, forming high mounds in the corners where the paths turn. You walk slowly, the sound of your footsteps muffled by the high walls. The air in the maze is even colder than in the open garden, held in place by the dense network of branches. The experience of the maze is one of repetitive geometry. You walk down a long, straight corridor, turn a corner, and find another identical corridor before you. The monotony is hypnotic. You find yourself counting the turns, left, right, left, right. The directions become a mantra, a rhythmic internal map. You are not trying to reach the center. You are simply enjoying the process of the walk. The maze is a world within a world, a private, secret space where the only reality is the tan leaves, the white snow, and the gray sky. You stop at a dead end, where the path is blocked by a solid wall of hornbeam. You look at the dead leaves, noticing the intricate network of veins and the serrated edges. They are remarkably well preserved, their structure still strong despite being dead for months. You reach out and touch a cluster of leaves, and they make a soft, whispering sound, a dry, rasping noise that is the only sound in the maze. You spend a few minutes listening to the silence, interrupted only by your own breathing and the occasional rustle of your cloak. Turning back, you retrace your steps through the corridors. The maze is a place of infinite repetition, a visual and auditory loop that lulls the mind into a state of deep calm. You find that you don't even need to think about where you are going. Your body seems to know the way, guided by the familiar rhythm of the paths. You are a part of the maze, a slow-moving figure in a landscape of frozen leaves and white silence. As you emerge from the maze, the manor house is once again in view, its gables and chimneys standing tall against the sky. You feel a sense of accomplishment, a satisfaction that comes from having explored the hidden corners of the garden. The walk is nearing its end, but you still have a few more sections to visit. You turn your steps toward the laundry yard and the brew house, where the practical, domestic life of the manor is centered. The sound of the snow continues to be your soundtrack, a steady, rhythmic crunch, crunch, crunch that marks your progress through the winter world. Leaving the geometric abstraction of the hornbeam maze behind, you move toward the more utilitarian heart of the manor estate. The transition is marked by a change in the very ground beneath your feet. The soft, yielding powder of the garden paths gives way to the firm, uneven surface of the service courtyard. Here, the ground is paved with river cobbles, rounded, smooth stones gathered from the nearby stream and bedded into a thick layer of sand and lime. The snow has been partially swept from these stones, leaving a thin, translucent glaze of ice that catches the dim light in a series of fractured, shimmering arcs. You adjust your gait, shortening your stride to maintain your balance. The sound of your walking shifts from the muffled crunch of the garden to a sharper, more rhythmic clink thud as the elm soles of your boots strike the frozen rock. This courtyard is a place of industry, though today it lies in a state of suspended animation. To your left stands the laundry yard, a rectangular enclosure defined by a low wall of flint and mortar. The flint stones are dark and glassy, their napped surfaces reflecting the gray sky like 1,000 tiny mirrors. You walk toward the entrance of the yard, observing the laundry lines that are strung between heavy oak posts. In the summer, these lines would be draped with white linen, billowing in the breeze like the sails of a ship. Now they are skeletal wires of hemp rope, coated in a thick layer of rime frost. You reach out and touch the rope with your gloved hand. It is stiff and unyielding, the fibers frozen into a solid, abrasive rod. The sound it makes is a dry, crystalline snap as the ice breaks under your touch, a tiny, percussive event that highlights the profound silence of the yard. A single forgotten cloth, perhaps a kitchen rag or a coarse linen apron, remains on the line, left behind in the haste of the last wash before the deep freeze. It has frozen into a rigid sculptural shape, its folds and creases preserved in ice. You examine the fabric, noticing the way the weave of the linen is visible through the glaze of frost. It looks more like carved stone than cloth. You lean in close, smelling the faint, clean scent of lye soap and wood ash that still clings to the fibers. It is a domestic, reassuring smell, a reminder of the constant cycle of cleaning and renewal that sustains the house. You spend several minutes observing the way the light filters through the frozen linen, turning the cloth into a translucent pane of alabaster. Moving past the laundry yard, you approach the brew house. This is a low, sturdy building with thick walls and a wide, squat chimney. Even through the heavy timber door, you can detect the change in temperature. The walls of the brew house radiate a subtle, ghost-like warmth, the lingering heat from the massive copper kettles that were fired 2 days ago to prepare the winter's ale. The air here smells of malt, of sweet, fermenting grain, and the bitter, resinous tang of dried hops. It is a heavy, nourishing scent that seems to fill your lungs with a sense of plenty. You pause by the wall, resting your gloved hand against the stones. The limestone is not biting cold like the garden walls. Instead, it has a neutral, almost welcoming temperature that speaks of the fire that recently burned within. Beside the brewhouse door sits a row of empty ale casks, stacked 3 high. They are made of seasoned oak staves, bound together with thick hoops of hammered iron. You observe the texture of the wood, which has been stained a deep burnt umber color by years of use. Each cask is a masterpiece of the cooper's art, the staves fitting together with a precision that requires no glue or nails. You count the casks, 1, 2, 3, 4. The numbers are a slow, internal rhythm that matches the steady beat of your heart. The iron hoops are covered in a fine dusting of snow, which has gathered in the crevices where the metal meets the wood. You trace the curve of a hoop with your finger, feeling the rough, pitted surface of the iron and the cold, smooth grain of the oak. It is a study in material contrast, held together by the grip of the frost. In the center of the service courtyard stands the great well, the lifeblood of the manor. It is protected by a circular wall of stone and a conical roof of cedar shingles. You walk toward it, your boots echoing off the cobbles. The well bucket, a heavy vessel of oak and iron, sits on the stone coping, frozen in place. You look at the chain that suspends it, a long, rusted series of links that disappears into the dark depths of the shaft. The chain is coated in ice, making it look like a frozen serpent. You reach out and gently rattle the chain. The sound is a low, metallic clank that travels down into the well, echoing off the wet stone walls far below. The sound is deep and hollow, a subterranean music that speaks of the hidden waters of the earth. You peer over the edge of the well into the darkness. You cannot see the water, but you can feel the damp, cool air rising from below. It carries a mineral scent, the smell of deep stone and ancient springs. You imagine the water far below, cold and still, protected from the winter wind. This sense of depth and permanence is deeply grounding. The well is a constant, an unchanging resource that remains reliable even when the rest of the world is frozen solid. You stand by the well for a long time, listening to the silence of the shaft, a silence that is different from the silence of the garden. It is a vertical, echoing quiet that seems to connect the surface of the world to its hidden heart. Leaving the well, you turn toward the wood yard, the final stop in the service wing. This is a vast, open area where the estate's fuel is processed and stored. The logs are stacked in immense, orderly ricks, some reaching as high as the eaves of the brew house. The woodyard is a place of profound logistical order. You walk between the stacks, the air smelling of split oak, seasoned ash, and the sharp, citrusy scent of pine needles. The ricks are a mosaic of textures, the rough, shaggy bark of the oak, the smooth, silver-gray skin of the ash, the dark, resinous knots of the pine. The snow has settled in the gaps between the logs, creating a rhythmic pattern of white lines against the dark wood. You stop to examine a stack of split oak. Each piece is a triangular wedge, its heartwood a pale, creamy yellow. You look at the growth rings, counting them slowly. Each ring represents a year in the life of the forest, a year of rain, a year of sun, a year of winter. You find a particularly large log and trace the rings with your finger. 10, 20, 30. The tree was an old one when it was felled, a silent witness to decades of history. Now it is a source of warmth, a stored battery of solar energy waiting to be released in the manor's hearths. You find the thought of this transformation deeply satisfying. The woodyard is a storehouse of comfort, a guarantee that the house will remain warm and safe until the spring. The sound of your movement in the woodyard is unique. The cobbles are covered in a thick layer of sawdust and wood chips, which have been compacted by the snow. Your footsteps are muffled and soft, a dull, woody thud that is entirely different from the crunch of the garden or the clink of the courtyard. It is a domestic, industrial sound. You find yourself walking in a slow, circular pattern around the largest rick, observing the way the logs are interlaced at the corners to provide stability. It is a simple, ancient technique, a piece of folk engineering that has remained unchanged for centuries. As you walk, you notice a small pile of wood shavings near a chopping block. They are thin, curled ribbons of ash as light as feathers. The snow has covered them partially, but their elegant spiral shapes are still visible. You pick one up, feeling its papery thinness between your gloved fingers. It is incredibly light, a delicate remnant of the woodcutter's labor. You let it fall, and it drifts slowly down to the snow, landing without a sound. This tiny, insignificant object becomes the focus of your attention for a minute. You observe its curve, its texture, and the way it sits on the white surface. In the vastness of the manor estate, this single shaving is a testament to the individual moments of work that sustain the whole. The chopping block itself is a massive section of an elm trunk, its surface scarred by thousands of axe blows. It is a rugged, weathered object, its top covered in a layer of frost that has filled the deep cuts in the wood. You rest your hand on the block, feeling its immense weight and solidity. It is an unshakable foundation, a silent partner in the work of the wood yard. You imagine the rhythmic swing of the axe, the sharp crack of the wood splitting, and the steady, repetitive labor of the woodsman. Today, the axe is put away, and the woodcutter is likely resting by a fire, but the block remains, a monument to the necessity of fuel. The light in the woodyard is beginning to deepen into a more substantial gray. The manor house, seen from this angle, looks like a fortress of comfort. The tall chimneys are silhouetted against the sky, their plumes of smoke now a darker, more opaque charcoal color. You can see the flickering light of a fire through one of the low windows of the servants' hall, a warm, orange glow that contrasts sharply with the cool, blue-gray of the exterior. This glimpse of the interior warmth draws you back toward the house. Your circuit of the grounds is almost complete, and the cold is beginning to find the gaps in your defenses. You begin to walk back toward the main courtyard, your footsteps returning to the rhythmic clink-thud of the cobbles. You pass the brew house again, savoring the smell of the malt one last time. You pass the laundry yard, where the frozen cloth still hangs in its sculptural silence. You pass the well, its chains still and cold in the darkness. Each step brings you closer to the end of your journey, but you do not hurry. The beauty of the winter walk lies in its slowness, in the deliberate observation of the mundane and the magnificent. As you reach the archway that leads back to the main terrace, you stop and look back at the service wing. It is a place of quiet, functional beauty, a world of wood and stone and iron that keeps the manor alive. You feel a deep sense of gratitude for the logistics of the estate, for the systems of water and fire and cleanliness that provide the framework for a comfortable life. The wood yard, the brew house, and the well are not just buildings. They are the physical manifestations of care and foresight. You turn your steps toward the manor house, the heavy elm soles of your boots striking the stone steps of the terrace with a final, echoing thud. The walk is not yet over, but the destination is in sight. You have one final stretch of the garden to navigate, the formal parterre that lies directly beneath the windows of the great hall. You move toward it, the rhythmic crunch of the snow returning as you leave the cobbles behind, a steady, hypnotic beat that guides you home through the silent, snow-covered Tudor world. The transition from the utilitarian rhythm of the wood yard to the formal elegance of the great parterre is a passage from the realm of necessity to the realm of pure, geometric aesthetic. As you step through the small postern gate that separates the service wing from the ornamental grounds, you are greeted by a vast, symmetrical vista that has been reduced to a minimalist masterpiece of white and charcoal. The great parterre lies directly beneath the towering, many-windowed facade of the Great Hall, designed to be viewed from the elevated gallery above, where its intricate patterns would appear like a massive, woven carpet of living green. Now, however, it is a landscape of soft, undulating ridges and deep, shadowed trenches, all held in the frozen grip of midwinter. You begin your progress across the wide gravel path that borders the parterre. The gravel, which in the summer is a warm, crunching gold, is now hidden beneath a layer of snow that has been compacted by the wind into a firm, resilient crust. Each step you take involves a deliberate, rhythmic pressure. You feel the crust resist for a fraction of a second before it gives way with a satisfying, crystalline snap, followed by the muffled compression of the powdery snow beneath. The sound is sharp and clear in the thin air, a rhythmic percussion that matches the steady, slow beating of your heart. You find yourself focusing on the exact moment of the break, the way the vibration travels up through the thick elm soles of your boots and into the bones of your legs. It is a grounding sensation, a physical dialogue between your body and the frozen earth. To your right, the Great Hall rises like a cliff of honey-colored stone and glass. The windows are the defining feature of this architectural marvel, vast, soaring expanses of leaded glass divided by thick mullions of carved limestone. You stop to observe the windows from this exterior vantage point. Each window is composed of hundreds of small, diamond-shaped panes, known as quarrels, held in place by a lattice of soft lead cames. The glass is not the perfectly flat, transparent substance of a future age, but is hand-blown forest glass, filled with tiny air bubbles, subtle ripples, and a faint, greenish tint. From where you stand, the glass is opaque, reflecting the dull gray of the sky in a series of fractured, shimmering planes. However, as you move slowly along the path, the angle of the light shifts, and you begin to see the life within the hall. Through the distorted, historical glass, you can see the warm, flickering amber of the great hearth. It is not a clear image, but a soft, pulsing glow that seems to breathe against the panes. You imagine the massive logs from the wood yard you just visited, now transformed into a roaring pillar of heat and light. The contrast is profound. On your side of the glass, the silent, freezing stillness of the winter. On the other, the crackling energy of the fire and the communal warmth of the household. You find a deep sense of comfort in this proximity to the fire, even though you are not yet there to enjoy it. The sight of the light is enough to sustain you through the final stages of your walk. You turn your attention back to the parterre. The knots of the garden are composed of low, meticulously clipped hedges of dwarf boxwood. In this formal section, the designs are strictly geometric, interlocking squares, circles, and lozenges that create a sense of absolute mathematical order. The snow has settled on these hedges with a peculiar precision. Because the tops of the hedges are perfectly flat, they have accumulated a uniform cap of snow, nearly 5 inches deep, that follows the contours of the boxwood with uncanny accuracy. The vertical sides of the hedges, however, remain dark and exposed, the waxy green leaves appearing almost black in the shadows. This creates a striking visual effect, a series of white architectural lines floating above the dark, frozen ground. You decide to walk along the central axis of the parterre, a wide path that leads toward the ornamental sundial and the stone fountain. As you move, you pass a series of stone plinths, each supporting a carved heraldic beast. You stop to examine a lion, the guardian of the southern quadrant. The lion is carved from a single block of Portland stone, a fine-grained, white-gray limestone that is particularly resistant to the elements. Over the decades, however, the stone has begun to weather, its surface becoming pitted and soft. The snow has filled these tiny indentations, highlighting the texture of the carving. The lion's mane is draped in a mantle of white, and a small drift has settled in the curve of its snarling mouth, giving it a strangely peaceful, muted expression. You reach out and touch the lion's paw, feeling the intense cold of the stone. It is a solid, unyielding chill that seems to vibrate with the history of the garden. The silence of the great parterre is different from the silence of the orchard or the yew walk. It is a more structured, formal silence, held in place by the symmetry of the surroundings. There is no movement here, no rustling of leaves or swaying of branches. The air is as still as the stone lions. You find yourself walking with even greater care, as if the slightest noise might disrupt the perfect balance of the scene. The sound of your cloak, the soft, rhythmic swish of the indigo wool against your legs, becomes a significant acoustic event. You listen to the friction of the fabric, the way the heavy fibers slide over one another. It is a warm, domestic sound, a reminder of the craftsmanship that went into the garment's creation. As you reach the center of the parterre, you arrive at the ornamental fountain. Like the other water features on the estate, it is frozen silent. The central figure of the fountain is a bronze triton blowing into a conch shell. In the summer, a powerful jet of water would emerge from the shell, creating a sparkling curtain of droplets. Now, the triton is encased in a thick glaze of clear ice, a frozen statue within a statue. The ice follows the muscular contours of the bronze, accentuating the details of the scales and the fins. You look into the basin of the fountain, which is filled with a solid block of ice. Beneath the surface, you can see the dark, geometric patterns of the tiled floor look like a submerged mosaic from an ancient world. Standing by the fountain, you take a moment to perform a mental audit of your physical state. Your feet, encased in the thick leather and elm-soled boots, are cool but dry, the layers of wool stockings providing a vital barrier against the frost. Your hands within the buckskin gloves are warm, the leather having absorbed the heat of your movement. Your core is snug and secure, the heavy wool cloak and padded doublet performing their duty with quiet efficiency. Only your face feels the full intensity of the winter air. The skin on your cheeks is tight and cold, and the tip of your nose is likely a bright, healthy pink. You inhale deeply, feeling the frigid air expand your lungs. It is a sharp, clean sensation that brings a sense of absolute clarity to your mind. The light is now at its lowest point of the afternoon, a deep, saturated gray that borders on violet in the shadows. The manor house is beginning to lose its detail, becoming a massive, dark silhouette against the sky. The windows of the great hall are now the dominant feature, their amber glow becoming more intense as the daylight fades. You watch as a servant moves across the hall inside, their figure a dark, fleeting shadow against the firelight. This glimpse of human activity is a reminder that the world continues to turn, even in the midst of this frozen stillness. The kitchen staff will be preparing the evening meal. The grooms will be bedding down the horses in the warm, straw-filled stables. The master of the house will be reading by the fire in his private closet. You begin the final stretch of your walk, moving from the fountain toward the grand staircase that leads back up to the terrace. This staircase is a masterpiece of Tudor masonry, featuring wide, shallow treads and heavy, carved balustrades. Each baluster is topped with a stone acorn, a symbol of growth and potential. The snow has drifted against the steps, creating a series of soft, white ramps. You begin the ascent, your boots finding a secure footing on the stone beneath the snow. The movement of climbing generates a fresh surge of warmth in your body, a pleasant exertion that rewards you for your endurance. Halfway up the stairs, you pause and turn to look back over the great parterre. From this elevated perspective, the geometry of the garden is revealed in its full glory. The white-capped hedges, the dark paths, the silent fountain, and the stone lions all fit together like the pieces of a complex, three-dimensional puzzle. It is a vision of order and beauty, a testament to the human desire to create harmony in the face of the wild, untamed winter. You feel a deep sense of peace, a quiet satisfaction in having witnessed this moment of frozen perfection. The garden is at rest, and you, too, are ready for rest. As you reach the top of the stairs and step back onto the Yorkstone terrace, the manor house is now towering above you. The great oak door with its heavy iron bands and solid latch is only a few yards away. You walk toward it, your footsteps echoing off the stone. The sound is final, a rhythmic conclusion to your journey. You reach for the iron latch, feeling its familiar, biting cold one last time. As you press down on the lever, the mechanical click is loud and clear in the silence. The door opens with its characteristic groan, and a wave of warm, scented air, wood smoke, roasted meat, and beeswax washes over you. You step across the threshold, and the transition is complete. The cold of the winter garden is left behind, replaced by the encompassing warmth of the Tudor home. You stand in the long gallery for a moment, the door closing softly behind you, listening to the absolute silence of the house. The walk is over, the garden is asleep, and the night has begun. You feel a profound sense of coziness, a deep, cellular contentment that only comes from a long, slow journey through the cold. The heavy oak door, having groaned upon its hinges to offer a glimpse of the amber sanctuary within, remains momentarily ajar. A thin, horizontal ribbon of warmth spills out onto the frosted Yorkstone of the terrace, a golden intrusion into the domain of the blue twilight. You stand at this threshold, the boundary between the wild, freezing elements and the structured comfort of the Tudor interior. You can hear the distant, rhythmic crackle of the great hearth in the hall, a sound like the folding of dry parchment, punctuated by the occasional sharp, muffled pop of a resinous knot of pine. The air that escapes the house carries the scent of beeswax, the faint, savory aroma of roasting venison from the far-off kitchens, and the sweet, heavy perfume of rushes strewn upon the floor. For a moment, the temptation to step inside and surrender to the lethargy of the heat is immense. Yet the garden has one final, secret quadrant to reveal, The north side, the realm of the private chapel and the stables, where the shadows are deepest and the winter's grip is most unrelenting. With a slow, deliberate movement, you pull your hand away from the iron latch. You decide to defer the warmth for just a few minutes more, opting to complete the full circuit of the manor's exterior. You turn your body away from the golden slit of the doorway, a slow pivot on the heels of your elm-soled boots. The sound is a low, grinding rasp against the stone, a gritty percussion that signals your return to the cold. You begin to walk along the northern stretch of the terrace, moving toward the shadow of the house's great north-facing wall. This is the side of the building that never sees the sun in winter, a place where the frost is thickest and the stones are perpetually damp and dark. As you move out of the light of the doorway, the world plunges into a deep, saturated indigo. This is the blue hour, that fleeting period between sunset and true night when the snow seems to emit its own ghostly, internal radiance. The sky above is a darkening vault of violet, and the first stars are beginning to pierce through the thinning veil of clouds, tiny, cold pinpricks of light that offer no warmth, only a sense of infinite distance. The air here feels perceptibly colder, a sharp, crystalline draft that seems to originate from the stone itself. You pull your indigo wool cloak more tightly around you, the fabric rustling with a heavy, sibilant sound. The wool is cold on the outside, but as you press your arms against your chest, you feel the reservoir of heat you have carried with you, a steady, pulsing warmth that remains uncompromised. The north wall of the manor is a formidable expanse of masonry, rising 3 stories high into the gloom. Because it is shielded from the wind and the sun, it has become a sanctuary for ancient ivies and thick, emerald green mosses. In the summer, this wall is a vertical forest, but now the ivy is frozen in place, its waxy, heart-shaped leaves coated in a delicate layer of hoarfrost. You walk close to the wall, your boots crunching through a drift of snow that has gathered at its base. You stop to examine the ivy, noticing how the frost has traced the outline of every vein and every serrated edge. The leaves are rigid and brittle. If you were to press them, they would shatter like thin glass. You refrain from doing so, preferring to leave the frozen tapestry undisturbed. The masonry here is different from the sun-warmed stones of the south. The limestone is a darker, bruised gray, and the mortar lines are thick with frozen moisture. You reach out a gloved hand to touch a particularly large stone at the corner of a buttress. The buckskin of your glove makes a faint, sliding sound against the rock. The stone is incredibly cold, a deep, thermal void that seems to pull the warmth from your fingers through the leather. You can feel the rough, granular texture of the limestone, the tiny pits and fossils that were formed millions of years ago, now held in a temporary icy stasis. You trace the shape of a gargoyle perched high above on a drainage spout, a grotesque, winged creature with a gaping maw. From its stone throat, a long, thick tongue of ice has grown, a frozen waterfall that reaches halfway down the wall. It is a sculptural representation of the winter's power to arrest all movement. You continue your walk toward the private chapel, a small, elegant structure attached to the north wing by a covered cloister. The chapel is built in the perpendicular Gothic style, with tall, narrow windows and delicate stone tracery. You enter the cloister, and the sound of your footsteps changes again. The roof overhead is a series of stone vaults, and the floor is paved with smooth, dark slate. Your boots make a sharp, echoing tap-tap-tap that rings through the narrow corridor. The air in the cloister is still and stagnant, smelling of cold stone and old incense that has drifted from the chapel's interior. You walk slowly, counting the pillars as you pass. 1, 2, 3, 4. The numbers are a rhythmic, internal chant that keeps pace with your breathing. To your right, the arches of the cloister open onto the chapel garden, a small, enclosed space designed for prayer and meditation. In the center of the garden is a stone wellhead, surrounded by low hedges of boxwood clipped into the shapes of crosses and anchors. The snow in this garden is perfectly level, untouched by the wind. It looks like a sheet of white parchment waiting for a divine hand to write upon it. You stop by one of the arches and look out. The silence here is absolute, a sacred, hushed quiet that feels weighted with centuries of devotion. You notice the way the light from the chapel's interior filters through the stained glass of the great east window. The glass is thick and irregular, but a soft, ethereal glow of ruby red and sapphire blue spills out onto the snow, staining the white surface with celestial colors. It is a breathtaking sight, a momentary bridge between the earthly winter and the spiritual warmth within. Leaving the chapel garden, you move toward the final section of the north wing, the stable yard. This is a large, square enclosure paved with heavy granite cobbles. As you exit the cloister, the smell of the world changes. The sharp, clean scent of snow and stone is replaced by a warmer, more animal aroma. It is the scent of the stables, dry hay, crushed oats, seasoned leather, and the heavy, humid smell of the horses themselves. This is a place of life and breath, even in the dead of winter. You walk toward the stable doors, which are made of massive planks of oak, reinforced with heavy iron bars. The doors are closed to keep out the draft, but you can hear the sounds from within. The muffled, rhythmic thud of a hoof against a wooden partition, the slow, dragging sound of a horse shifting its weight in the straw, and the soft, sibilant blow of a large animal's breath. You stand by the stable door, listening to these domestic sounds. They are comforting and rhythmic, a reminder of the vital labor that sustains the manor. You imagine the grooms inside, moving through the dim light of lanterns, checking the water troughs and topping up the mangers with sweet-smelling hay. You can see the steam rising from the cracks in the doors, a visible sign of the heat generated by the animals. You reach out and touch the wood of the door, and it feels remarkably warm compared to the stone of the chapel. You lean your head against the oak, closing your eyes for a moment. The rhythmic breathing of the horses is hypnotic, a slow, steady pulse that matches your own. You feel a deep sense of companionship with these silent, sturdy creatures, all of you waiting out the winter together. Beside the stable door sits a large stone mounting block, used by the riders to reach their saddles. It is covered in a thick cap of snow, which has drifted to form a small white mountain on one side. You observe the way the wind has carved the snow into a sharp, aerodynamic ridge. You reach out and brush the snow from the top of the block with your gloved hand. The movement is slow and rhythmic, the snow falling to the ground with a soft, sliding sound. You reveal the dark, worn surface of the stone, which has been polished by the boots of countless riders over the generations. You can see the marks of the mason's chisel, now softened by time. This small act of clearing the snow is a satisfying task, a tiny contribution to the order of the estate. The light is now almost entirely gone, replaced by the deep, luminous blue of the winter night. The stars are brighter now, forming familiar constellations across the sky: the Great Bear, the Hunter, the North Star. You look up, feeling the immense scale of the universe and the small, cozy reality of the manor house. The cold is beginning to deepen, a sharp, biting frost that makes the air feel brittle. You can feel the moisture in your breath freezing on the fur lining of your cloak, forming tiny, glistening beads of rime. Your cheeks are numb, but your heart is warm, fueled by the steady exertion of the walk and the anticipation of the fire. You begin the final return journey to the terrace, retracing your steps through the stable yard and along the north wall. The cobbles click beneath your boots, and the snow crunches with a predictable, rhythmic cadence. You pass the chapel again, the ruby and sapphire light still glowing softly on the snow. You pass the frozen ivy and the stone gargoyle, its icy tongue gleaming in the starlight. Every feature of the landscape is now a familiar friend, a landmark in your slow, meditative journey. You find yourself walking with a sense of profound contentment, a quiet joy in the simplicity of the moment. As you reach the corner of the north wing and turn back onto the terrace, the great hall comes into view once more. The windows are now brilliant lanterns of amber light, casting long, glowing rectangles across the snow. The great oak door is still slightly ajar, just as you left it, a welcoming invitation to return. You walk toward it, your footsteps echoing off the Yorkstone. The sound is final and resolute. You have completed the circuit. You have seen the garden in all its winter glory, from the geometric knots to the frozen pond, from the utilitarian wood yard to the sacred chapel. You stop one last time at the threshold, looking back at the dark, silent world you have just traversed. The garden is a masterpiece of stillness, a world at rest. The snow is a perfect white shroud, preserving the life within for the coming spring. You feel a deep sense of gratitude for the silence and the cold, for the way they have clarified your mind and settled your spirit. You take one final, deep breath of the freezing air, feeling it expand your lungs with a sharp, bracing tingle. Then you turn toward the door. You reach for the iron latch, and this time you press it down with purpose. The mechanical click is a definitive end to the journey. The door swings open wide, and you are enveloped in a sudden, overwhelming wave of warmth. It is a physical sensation, a thick, sweet-smelling cloud of heat that washes over your face and chest. You step inside, and the door closes behind you with a heavy, satisfying thud. The transition is final. You are no longer a walker in the snow. You are a resident of the hearth. You stand in the long gallery, the darkness of the night visible through the windows, and you prepare for the final, slow ritual of your return, the shedding of the winter layers, and the surrender to the deep, hypnotic sleep of the Tudor manor. The heavy oak door settles into its frame with a profound, resonant thud, a sound that vibrates through the thick timber and into the very soles of your boots. With the closure of that portal, the world of the silent, snow-covered garden is instantly transformed into a memory, a landscape seen through a glass, darkly. You stand for a long, unhurried moment in the vestibule of the long gallery, your back against the solid wood. The transition is not merely one of temperature, but of atmosphere. The silence of the exterior was vast and cold. The silence of the interior is dense, warm, and laden with the sense of a 16th century winter. You can hear the rhythmic, ticking sound of the cooling stones in the wall and the distant, melodic crackle of the great fire in the hall, a sound like the gentle snapping of dry twigs underfoot. You begin the slow, methodical process of shedding your winter layers, a ritual that is as much about decompression as it is about comfort. Your movements are heavy and deliberate, dictated by the stiffness of the cold-soaked fabric. You reach up to your throat, where the heavy bronze clasp of your indigo cloak resides. The metal is cold to the touch, but the heat of your body has kept it from the biting frost. You feel for the pin, your fingers, still slightly numbed by the garden air, moving with a slow, cautious precision. The clasp releases with a soft, metallic click, a small sound that feels monumental in the quiet of the gallery. As the weight of the cloak begins to slide from your shoulders, you feel a sudden lightness, as if a physical burden has been lifted. You catch the heavy wool before it falls, feeling the thick, coarse texture of the indigo fibers. The outside of the cloak is damp and cold, carrying the microscopic residue of the snow you walked through, while the inside remains a reservoir of your own trapped heat. You drape the garment over a high-backed oak chair, observing the way the fabric settles into deep, sculptural folds. The wool gives off a faint, earthy aroma of sheep and wood smoke, a scent that is the very essence of the Tudor home. You stand there for a moment, watching a single, stray snowflake that had clung to the hem of the cloak finally vanish into a tiny, dark spot of moisture on the floorboards. Next, you attend to your hands. The buckskin gloves are warm and supple from the heat of your palms. You pull the first glove off, finger by finger, a slow and rhythmic extraction. The leather makes a faint, sliding sound against your skin, a dry, tactile whisper. Once the hand is free, you flex your fingers, watching the blood return to the tips in a slow, pulsing glow of pink. The skin feels sensitive to the warm air of the gallery, a tingling sensation that is both sharp and soothing. You repeat the process with the second glove, placing the pair neatly on the seat of the chair beside your cloak. The gloves retain the shape of your hands, hollow shells of leather that seem to be resting after their long journey. The removal of your boots is perhaps the most satisfying part of the ritual. You find a sturdy stool of carved walnut and sit, the movement slow and heavy. You reach down to the rawhide laces of your elm-soled boots. The leather thongs are stiff and slightly damp, requiring a firm, steady pull to loosen the knots. You can hear the sound of the leather dragging through the eyelets, a rhythmic, rasping scritch-scritch that echoes softly off the paneled walls. Once the laces are undone, you grip the heel of the first boot and pull. The boot slides off with a soft, hollow thwack, revealing the thick, cream-colored wool of your stockings. The relief is immediate. Your foot, freed from the rigid enclosure of the leather and wood, feels light and strangely buoyant. You press your toes against the polished floorboards, feeling the grain of the oak through the wool. The wood is cool, but not cold, a stable and grounding surface. You remove the second boot, placing the pair side by side on the floor. They look like small, dark monuments to the miles you have walked through the snow. You stand up, and for the first time in hours, you feel the true scale of your own body, unencumbered by the weight of the winter gear. You begin to walk down the length of the gallery toward the great hall. The floor is covered in a thick layer of fresh rushes, gathered from the riverbanks and dried during the late summer. Interspersed with the rushes are dried herbs, meadowsweet, lavender, and santolina, which release a soft botanical perfume as you step upon them. The sound of your walking is now a gentle, rustling whisper, a rhythmic hush-hush that is infinitely soothing. You move with a slow, padding gait, your wool-clad feet sinking slightly into the springy carpet of greenery. The scent of the herbs is sweet and slightly medicinal, a domestic counterpoint to the sharp, resinous smell of the garden. The light in the gallery is dim and amber, provided by a few beeswax candles held in silver sconces along the walls. The flames are steady and still, casting long, wavering shadows that dance across the dark oak paneling. You observe the way the light catches the carved details of the linen fold patterns on the walls, the way the shadows create depth and mystery in the wood. Everything in the house feels solid, permanent, and immensely safe. The walls are thick enough to exclude the deepest frost, and the roof is a vast, sheltering canopy that holds the warmth of the hearth like a precious treasure. As you enter the great hall, the scale of the space expands. The ceiling is a magnificent forest of hammerbeam arches, the dark oak timbers disappearing into the gloom of the upper reaches. In the center of the hall, the great hearth is a roaring, pulsing heart of fire. A massive oak log, perhaps 4 feet in length, lies across the iron fire dogs, its surface a glowing landscape of orange and charcoal. You walk toward the fire, the heat increasing with every step until it becomes a physical presence, a thick, invisible blanket that wraps around your entire body. You stop a few feet from the hearth and stand perfectly still. You watch the flames, which are a complex ballet of colors, deep crimson at the base, bright orange in the center, and a pale, ethereal blue at the tips. The sound of the fire is a constant, rhythmic drone, a mixture of the sharp crackle of the wood and the low, steady roar of the updraft in the chimney. It is a hypnotic sound, a primal music that lulls the mind into a state of deep, unthinking calm. You feel the heat penetrating through your doublet and shirt, reaching deep into your bones. The chill of the garden is finally and completely exorcised, replaced by a profound, cellular warmth. Beside the hearth stands a large, winged armchair, upholstered in a heavy, velvet fabric of a deep pomegranate red. You sink into the chair, the velvet soft and welcoming against your back. The wings of the chair protect you from any stray drafts, creating a private sanctuary of heat and light. You rest your head back, closing your eyes. The rhythmic sound of the fire and the scent of the wood smoke create a cocoon of sensory comfort. You can feel your heartbeat slowing down, matching the steady pulse of the hearth. Your breathing becomes deep and regular, a slow expansion and contraction of the chest. In this state of near slumber, your mind drifts back to the garden. You see the white-capped hedges, the silent fountain, the frozen pond, and the ancient yew walk. They are no longer places of cold and exertion, but beautiful static images like the illustrations in a prayer book. You think of the dormant roots beneath the snow, the sleeping fish in the pond, and the horses huddling in the warm straw of the stables. The whole world is at rest, held in a state of perfect, frozen equilibrium. You are a part of that rest, a fragment of the silence that has finally found its way home. After a long time, you open your eyes and look at the fire again. The oak log has settled, a cascade of glowing embers falling into the ash pit with a soft, sliding sound. The light in the hall has dimmed as the candles burn low, the shadows growing longer and more velvet-like. It is time for the final transition. You push yourself up from the chair, your movements slow and heavy with the lethargy of the heat. You walk across the hall, the rushes whispering one last time against your feet, and move toward the grand staircase that leads to the upper chambers. The climb is a slow, rhythmic progression. You count the steps, 1, 2, 3. The numbers are a fading mantra in your mind. At the top of the stairs, the air is cooler and stiller, the scent of lavender from the linen presses filling the corridor. You reach the door to your bedchamber, a solid slab of oak that opens with a faint, familiar creak. Inside, the room is a sanctuary of shadows. A small fire burns in the secondary hearth, providing just enough light to see the great four-poster bed that dominates the space. The bed is a monumental structure of carved wood and heavy tapestries. The curtains are drawn tight, creating a room within a room. You move toward the bed, the thick rugs on the floor muffling your footsteps. You peel back the heavy quilts of goose down and wool, revealing the cool, crisp linen of the sheets. The linen has been scented with dried woodruff, a sweet, hay-like aroma that invites sleep. You climb into the bed, the mattress of curled horsehair and wool providing a firm, supportive foundation. The weight of the covers is immense and comforting. You feel the layers of wool and silk settling over you, a physical manifestation of security. The sheets, initially cool, quickly absorb the heat of your body, becoming a warm, private cocoon. You lie on your back, looking up at the dark tester of the bed, listening to the absolute silence of the room. The only sound is the rhythmic, distant pulse of the fire in the hall below and the soft, steady flow of your own breath. The world of the Tudor garden is now a distant dream, a white and silent memory. You think of the snow falling softly in the darkness, adding layer upon layer to the landscape. You think of the manor house, a solid, unshakable fortress in the heart of the winter. You feel a deep, overwhelming sense of gratitude for the warmth, the shelter, and the silence. Your eyelids grow heavy, the darkness of the room pressing gently against them. The thoughts in your mind begin to blur and dissolve, like snowflakes landing on warm wool. One by one, the images of the garden fade, the stone lions, the sundial, the frozen reeds, until only the silence remains. You are safe, you are warm, you are tired. The rhythmic pulse of the house guides you down into the deep, restorative sleep of the winter. The walk is over, the day is done. The garden sleeps, and so do you. The end.